Today we're going to dive into a really powerful, ancient letter that tackles a problem that feels so modern, so relevant to us today. Why is it that passionate, like-minded groups so often end up just tearing each other apart? I mean, you've seen it, right? A movement starts with this amazing, unified vision, but then it splinters over who's the purest. A company kicks off with a shared mission, and then it just devolves into turf wars between departments. A community forms around a belief they all share, and then boom, factions, arguments, and the whole thing just fractures. But here's the thing. This is not a new problem. Not at all. In fact, the letter we're looking at today is a nearly 2,000-year-old attempt to solve this exact issue. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll get the context for this letter written to a city called Corinth. Then we'll get into the messy details, the reports of division the author was hearing about. From there, we'll look at his diagnosis of the root cause, this clash between worldly wisdom and God's wisdom. We'll explore the radical solution he offers, what he calls the foolishness of the cross. We'll see how the unlikely were chosen to shame the wise, all leading up to the ultimate point, figuring out the true source of our boast. Okay, so let's set the scene. Our source is a letter from a guy named Paul, and he's writing to a group of believers in the ancient city of Corinth. Now, you gotta picture Corinth. This wasn't some sleepy little town. It was a major hub, a bustling, wealthy, super influential port city. It was the place to be for commerce, for new ideas, for culture. And it's right into that environment that Paul is sending this letter. And right off the bat, you gotta notice how Paul introduces himself. He doesn't just say, hey, it's your friend Paul. He identifies as a called apostle. And that's a huge deal. It means he sees his role as being a special messenger, someone who is personally chosen to deliver a message that isn't even his own. He's a representative. And check out how he opens his letter to the Corinthians. Even though, and we'll see this in a second, he's about to call them out for some really serious issues, he starts by affirming who they are. He calls them sanctified, meaning they've been set apart, made holy. He actually thanks God for them. It sets this incredible tone, right? He's not scolding them like an angry outsider. He's reminding them as one of their own of who they're really meant to be. All right, so after that really gracious opening, Paul doesn't waste any time. He gets right to the heart of the matter. He isn't just writing to check in. He's writing because he's gotten some very, very troubling reports about what's going on with them. And this isn't just some vague rumor he picked up. He's specific. He names his source. He says people from Chloe's household told him directly that the community is just being eaten alive by quarrels and factions. The problem is real, it's serious, and word has traveled a long, long way to get to Paul. So what was all the fighting about? Well, people were basically forming fan clubs around their favorite leaders. You had Team Paul, Team Apollos, who was a really gifted speaker, and Team Cephas, which is another name for Peter. It's kind of like today, how people pledge loyalty to one online personality or thinker over another. And then you had this other group, this super spiritual faction, saying, oh, we only follow the Messiah, which was probably their way of looking down on everybody else. Paul's response to this is just a series of absolutely brilliant, razor-sharp rhetorical questions. He's trying to show them how absurd their little fan clubs are. You know, has the Messiah been chopped up into little pieces, one for each of your leaders? Was I, Paul, the one who was crucified for you? The answer is so obviously no. He's using these questions to try and snap them out of these petty rivalries and get them to focus on the one thing that's actually supposed to unite them. Now here's the crucial part. Paul sees that this isn't just a simple personality clash. He digs deeper and diagnoses the root cause. He says the Corinthians were taking the value system of the world around them, a world that loved status, big words, and human intellect, and they were dragging it right into their spiritual community. They were basically applying the logic of a popularity contest to their faith. And Paul reminds them, hey, think about when I was with you. He says he intentionally didn't come at them with clever and eloquent speech. He didn't use all the fancy tricks of a polished Greek speaker. And why not? Because he didn't want anyone to be impressed with him. He wanted all of the power to be found in the message itself, the message of the cross. And this slide just lays out the central conflict perfectly. On one side, you have worldly wisdom. That's the stuff philosophers chase. It's what people who demand big, flashy signs are looking for. It's all about status, influence, and winning a debate. But on the other side, you have God's wisdom. And it's completely different. It's found in the message of the cross, which to the world just looks like total foolishness. It's found in weakness. But Paul says that is the true power of God. So this brings Paul to his big, radical solution. And it's not about finding a better argument or a more clever speaker. No, it's about fully embracing the very thing the world looks at and dismisses as complete and utter nonsense. And this is really the paradox at the core of Paul's entire argument. You have one message, a Messiah who was crucified. But it's received in two totally opposite ways. To those who are rejecting it, it makes no sense. It's absurd. It's foolish. But to those who are being saved, that exact same message is where they see the power of God. The message doesn't change. It's the perspective of the person hearing it that changes everything. And Paul's not just making this up, He's grounding this whole idea in Scripture. He's saying this isn't some new concept. God has always said that he's going to turn human intellectual pride on its head. He quotes the prophet Isaiah to show that God's plan all along was to destroy the so-called wisdom of the wise. And this isn't just some abstract, theological idea. Paul makes it incredibly real by showing them how this very principle is playing out in the lives of the people who make up their church.
Yeah, he gets super personal here. He's basically saying, hey, look around the room, look at yourselves. By the world's standards, most of them weren't the intellectuals, they weren't the influencers, they weren't the aristocrats, they weren't the wise or the powerful. Their own community was living, breathing proof of God's completely upside-down value system.
This slide just lays out the logic of this great reversal so perfectly. God intentionally picks what the world calls foolish to show how silly the wise actually are. He picks the weak to reveal how fragile the strong really are. He chooses the despised and the insignificant for one very specific purpose, to nullify the things the world thinks are so important. Okay, so this all leads to the big finale, the ultimate takeaway. Why? Why does God operate this way? What's the point of this whole strategy of flipping worldly values upside down? And there it is. That's the reason. The whole system is designed so that not a single human being can stand before God and brag about their resume, their intellect, or their social status. God's method is built to systematically remove human pride from the entire equation. So if they can't boast in their favorite leader, not Paul, not Apollos, and they can't boast in their own smarts or their status, then what's left? Paul wraps it all up with this powerful instruction, quoting Scripture again. If you're going to boast, if you're going to glory in anything, let it be in the Lord. That is the ultimate cure for their division, pointing all the praise and loyalty to the only one who actually deserves it. And so we're left with this question, a question this ancient letter forces us to ask ourselves today. In a world that screams at us to be strong, to be influential, to build our personal brand, what does it really mean to find wisdom in what looks like weakness, and to find real power in what the world just throws away as foolish?